The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive dome above the heads of hundreds of alien beings. Jiwon stood at the center of it all, her hands behind her back as she waited for the final decision. She was Earth's ambassador, and today would decide the fate of all humans in the galaxy. Around her, strange creatures spoke in voices that sounded like music, grinding stone, or rushing water. The Nexari looked like living crystals that sparkled when they moved. The Vorthak had long tentacles that waved in the air as they talked. There were dozens of other species, all very different from humans. Jiwon had been in this hall for 3 days now. 3 long days of listening to lies about her people. The aliens said humans were too violent. They said humans moved too fast through space. They said humans could not be trusted with advanced technology. But Jiwon knew the real truth. The other species were afraid. In just 200 years, humans had gone from one small planet to over 50 colonies. Human ships were faster than most alien ships. Human soldiers were braver in battle. Human scientists made new discoveries every day. The aliens were scared that humans would become too powerful. Minsu sat in the gallery above, watching everything. He was Earth's military leader, but he could not help Jiwon now. This was not a fight that could be won with guns or ships. This was politics, and the aliens had already made up their minds. The crystal being at the center of the council began to speak. Its voice rang like bells in the huge hall. The council has reached a decision about the human species, it said. We find that humans are too dangerous to remain in civilized space. Jiwon felt her heart sink, but she kept her face calm. She had expected this, but it still hurt to hear it. All human colonies, ships, and stations must leave known galactic space within 1 solar cycle, the crystal alien continued. Any humans who remain after this time will be destroyed. The hall erupted in noise. Some aliens cheered. Others made sounds that might have been celebration in their own languages. Jiwon just stood there thinking about the billions of humans who would have to leave their homes. This is wrong, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You exile us not because we have done evil, but because you fear what we might become. A Vorthak with purple tentacles waved them angrily. Humans expand too quickly. Humans fight too much. Humans will bring war to peaceful space. Jiwon wanted to laugh at that. She had seen the files about what these peaceful species did when no one was watching. The Nexari had destroyed 3 entire worlds. The Vorthak kept slave races. Many other council species had committed terrible crimes. But because they did it slowly and quietly, the council called them civilized. We accept your judgment, Jiwon said finally. But remember this day. Remember that you drove us away not for what we did, but for what you feared we might do. Far away from the council hall, Captain Hyunwoo received the message on his ship. The new soul was exploring the edge of the galaxy, looking for new worlds that humans might settle. His crew was small but skilled. Dr. Yoonji ran the science department. Taehyun kept the engines running. His sister Nari studied alien plants and animals. Sir, the communications officer said, we're getting an emergency message from Earth. Hyunwoo read the message twice before he believed it. Exile. All humans had to leave known space in 1 year, or they would be killed. What do we do, Captain? Yoonji asked. She was a smart woman who had spent her life studying the stars. Now she looked scared. Hyunwoo looked at the star charts on his screen. Behind them was the galaxy, full of alien species who now wanted humans dead. Ahead was the abyss, the empty space between galaxies. No ship had ever gone into the abyss and returned. We go forward, he said. Into the dark. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. Panic filled the streets of every human city. How could they move billions of people in just 1 year? Where would they go? But humans had always been good at surviving impossible things. The government began the largest evacuation in history. Every ship that could fly was turned into a transport. Factories worked day and night to build new ships. Scientists designed new engines that could travel between stars faster than ever before. Taehyun worked without sleeping for days. He helped design new ships that could carry entire cities. The ships would be humanity's new homes among the stars. They had to be perfect because there would be no going back. Nari packed the seeds and genetic samples from Earth's plants and animals. If humans were going to survive in the dark between galaxies, they would need to bring life with them. On the day of departure, Jiwon stood on the observation deck of the flagship Exodus. Below her, Earth looked beautiful and blue, just like it always had. Millions of ships filled the space around the planet, waiting for the order to leave. "All ships, this is Ambassador Jiwon," she said into the communication system. "Today we leave the galaxy that no longer wants us, but we do not leave in shame. We leave to find our own destiny among the stars." The great fleet began to move. Thousands of ships carrying billions of humans turned away from the galaxy and headed into the black emptiness of space. They were going where no living thing had ever gone before. The aliens and the council celebrated that day. They thought they had solved their human problem. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had taken a species that was already dangerous and given them a reason to become something much, much worse. As the human fleet disappeared into the darkness between galaxies, the Nexari and Vorthak felt safe for the first time in centuries. They would not feel safe again for a very long time. The abyss was nothing like the space humans knew. When the great fleet left the galaxy behind, they entered a place where the rules of reality seemed broken. Space itself felt different here. The stars were too far away to see, and the darkness was so complete it seemed alive. Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, watching his instruments give impossible readings. His ship shook as waves of dark energy passed through it like ocean currents. These storms could tear apart a normal ship in minutes. "Captain," said Lieutenant Kiwon at the sensor station, "I'm reading something ahead. It's big, but I can't tell what it is." Through the darkness, strange shapes moved. They looked like islands floating in empty space, but they were made of something that wasn't quite matter. The fleet's scientists had never seen anything like them. Dr. Yoonji worked day and night to understand what they were seeing. "The dark matter here is active," she told Hyunwoo. "It's almost like it's alive. And there are gravity fields that exist without any visible source." Taehyun struggled to keep the ship's engines working. Every day brought new problems. The dark energy storms would overload their power systems. Strange fields would make their navigation computers give wrong readings. Some areas of space seemed to slow down time itself. "I've never seen anything like this," he told his sister Nari as they worked together to fix another damaged system. "It's like the laws of physics don't work the same way here." Nari had been studying the strange life forms they found floating in the dark. They weren't like any plants or animals from Earth. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "I think we're not just in empty space," she said. "I think we're in a place where other kinds of life exist." The first attack came without warning. Something huge and invisible struck the transport ship Busan. The ship's hull began to dissolve as if something was eating it from the inside. Emergency teams worked desperately to save the passengers, but half the ship was gone before they could react. More attacks followed. The things hunting them couldn't be seen on any sensor, but they were definitely there. Ships would suddenly start falling apart. Crew members would vanish from sealed rooms. The fleet's military ships fought back, but their weapons seemed to pass right through their enemies. Admiral Sung-ho commanded the military escort ships. He was a practical man who had fought in 3 wars, but this enemy was unlike anything he had ever faced. "How do you fight something you can't see or touch?" he asked his officers. The answer came from an unexpected source. Nari had been working with the strange life forms in her laboratory when one of them began to change. It started to glow with a soft light, and suddenly she could hear something in her mind. Not words, but ideas and feelings. The creature was trying to communicate. "It's not hostile," she told the captain excitedly. "It's curious about us. It wants to know why we're here." Using a combination of mathematics, pictures, and pure intuition, Nari began to talk with the creature. It was unlike anything humans had ever encountered. It existed in many dimensions at once and had been alive for millions of years. Through their conversation, she learned that the attackers were not evil. They were protecting their territory from what they saw as invaders. The creatures of the abyss had been alone for so long that they had forgotten how to deal with visitors. But there was something else. The ancient creature told Nari that it and its kind had been waiting. They had seen visions of beings from the bright galaxy who would come seeking power in the darkness. Beings brave enough or foolish enough to try to master the abyss itself. "It says we're different from the others," Nari reported to Hyunwoo. "Other species that have tried to enter the abyss always turn back when things got difficult. But we keep going forward, even when we're afraid." The creature, which Nari began to call a Void Walker, offered to help. It could teach humans how to survive in the abyss. But there would be a price. Humans would have to change. They would have to become something new. Admiral Sung-ho was suspicious. How do we know we can trust these things, he asked. They've been attacking our ships. The answer came during another dark energy storm. This one was bigger than any they had faced before. The storm stretched across space for millions of miles, and there was no way around it. Ships began to fail as the energy tore through their hulls. Then the Voidwalkers acted. They surrounded the human fleet with their own bodies, absorbing the worst of the storm's power. Many of them died protecting ships full of strangers. Their sacrifice saved thousands of human lives. They're not our enemies, Nari said after the storm passed. They're offering us something no other species has ever been offered. A chance to become masters of this dark space. The fleet's leaders met to discuss the offer. Jiwon, now aboard the flagship, listened as scientists and military officers argued about the risks. We don't know what this change will do to us, worried Dr. Kang-ho, the fleet's chief medical officer. We might not be human anymore when it's finished. We might not survive at all if we don't accept, replied Admiral Sung-ho. Our ships are breaking down. Our food supplies won't last forever, and there are things in this darkness that we still don't understand. Captain Hyunwoo spoke for many when he said, "The Council exiled us because they feared what we might become. Maybe it's time to show them they were right to be afraid." The vote was close, but humanity chose to accept the Voidwalkers' offer. They would learn to live in the abyss. They would become something new. Something that could survive in the dark between galaxies and master powers that no normal species could understand. As the first volunteers underwent the changes that would make them something more than human, Jiwon looked out at the endless darkness surrounding the fleet. The Council had thought they were solving their human problem by sending them into exile. Instead, they had just given humanity the chance to become something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The first patrol ship to disappear was the Nexari cruiser Bright Harmony. It was on routine patrol near the galactic rim when it simply vanished. No distress signal. No explosion, no debris. The ship was there one moment and gone the next, as if it had never existed. Commander Velthar of the Nexari fleet reviewed the sensor logs for the 10th time. His crystalline form sparkled with confusion as he tried to understand what had happened. "There is no record of the ship ever being here," he told his aide. "But we have crew manifests and mission orders. How can a ship disappear from history itself?" More ships began to vanish. A Vorthak science vessel exploring a dead system, a joint council patrol investigating asteroid miners, 3 cargo ships carrying supplies to outer colonies. Each time the pattern was the same: complete disappearance without any trace. The Council dismissed these incidents at first. Space was dangerous and ships were lost to accidents all the time. Pirates still operated on the rim. Perhaps the ships had hit asteroids or suffered engine failures in deep space. But Captain Dongwoo of the shadow ship Void's Edge knew better. He watched from dark space as his targets went about their normal routines, unaware that death was studying them from angles they couldn't perceive. His ship existed partially outside normal reality, invisible to any sensor the Council possessed. "Target acquired," he reported to Admiral Minji. "Vorthak, heavy cruiser, crew of 400. They're investigating the disappearance of their science vessel." "Proceed," came the reply across channels that used dark energy instead of radio waves. "Leave evidence of our presence, but no survivors to report it." Dongwoo's ship phased into normal space directly inside the Vorthak cruiser. The alien crew had only moments to scream before Abyss Guard soldiers appeared in their midst. These human warriors moved like living shadows, their bodies flickering between dimensions as they struck. The battle was over in minutes. The Vorthak weapons passed harmlessly through enemies who weren't entirely there. The humans struck from impossible angles, appearing inside sealed armor suits and striking from dimensions the aliens couldn't see. When it was over, Dongwoo left behind a message burned into the ship's main computer. Just 3 words in the old human language: "We have returned." The discovery of the message sent panic through the council chambers. Humans were supposed to be dead or lost in the void between galaxies. How could they have returned? And how had they become capable of such impossible attacks? Admiral Vorthak, leader of the Vorthak military, studied the battle recordings from his command ship. "Their technology is beyond anything we've seen," he told the assembled council. "They can phase in and out of normal space. Their soldiers can walk through solid matter. This isn't just advanced technology, it's something that shouldn't be possible." The crystalline Nexari leader, High Crystal Zetheron, sparked with worry. "Perhaps we should attempt to negotiate." If humans have returned with such power, maybe we can reach some kind of agreement. But it was too late for negotiation. The psychological warfare had already begun. Council ships reported seeing impossible things. Vessels that appeared on sensors but couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Crews that found messages written on the walls of sealed rooms. Soldiers who saw human faces reflected in their helmet visors, only to turn around and find empty corridors. Major Hiram of the Abyss Guard led these infiltration missions. She could phase through any barrier and exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Her team would appear on enemy ships, plant evidence of their presence, and vanish before anyone could react. "The fear is spreading faster than we expected," she reported to General Yuna. "Enemy crews are starting to see humans everywhere, even when we're not there. Their own paranoia is doing half our work for us." Meanwhile, Captain Sung-hoon led the intelligence-gathering operation. His ship, the Dark Current, could tap into enemy communications without being detected. What they learned made the human leadership furious. During the 30 years of human exile, the Council had not become more peaceful. They had enslaved the Corvani species and forced them to work in dangerous mines. They had committed genocide against the Pralani when that species refused to give up their homeworld. 3 other races had been wiped out completely, their planets strip-mined for resources. They built their peaceful civilization on the bones of other species, Sung-hoon reported. "They are exactly what they accused us of being, only worse." The intelligence confirmed what humanity had suspected. The Council had not exiled them for being violent or dangerous. They had exiled them for being competition. The other species wanted to be the only predators in the galaxy. Seokjin communed with the deepest Voidwalker entities and received their blessing for what was to come. The ancient beings had watched the galaxy for millions of years and seen the Council's crimes. They agreed that justice was needed. "The Deep Ones give us permission to act," he told the fleet's leadership. His form flickered between human and something vast and terrible. "They have judged the Council and found them wanting." When the Council finally acknowledged they faced a real threat, Ji-won transmitted a message across all their communication networks. She appeared on every screen in Council space simultaneously, her image transmitted through dark energy channels that couldn't be blocked or traced. She looked older, but not weak. The power of the abyss flowed around her like a living thing. Behind her, the shapes of massive ships could be seen moving through dimensions that normal beings couldn't perceive. "Leaders of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying across 1,000 worlds. 30 years ago, you exiled humanity from civilized space. You said we were too dangerous, too violent, too aggressive to live among peaceful species." The Council leaders watched in horror from their secure bunkers. How was she transmitting on their networks? How had humans learned to manipulate reality itself? "You were right to fear us," Ji-won continued, "but not for the reasons you claimed. You feared us because we showed you what you really were. Bullies and tyrants who preyed on the weak while calling yourselves civilized." Images flashed across the screens, records of the Council's crimes that should have been impossible to obtain. The slave camps, the destroyed worlds, the species driven to extinction. "During our exile, we learned who you really are," Ji-won said. "We have evidence of your crimes. We have testimony from your victims, and we have grown powerful enough to ensure that justice is finally served." The transmission ended, but its message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were no longer the species that had fled into the dark. They had become something far more dangerous than anything the Council had feared. War was coming, and the Council was about to face an enemy that could strike from dimensions they couldn't see, with weapons they couldn't understand, driven by a hunger for justice that 30 years of exile had only made stronger. The exiles had become the judges, and Judgment Day was coming to the galaxy. 30 years had passed since the human fleet entered the abyss. The scared refugees who had fled the galaxy were gone, replaced by something new and terrible. Humanity had learned to live in the darkness between worlds, and the darkness had changed them. Taehyun stood in the engine room of the New Soul, but the ship around him was no longer recognizable. The metal wall seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Strange lights moved through them like living things. The engines no longer burned fuel. They fed on the dark energy that flowed through the abyss like rivers. "Power levels are steady," he reported to the bridge, but his voice sounded different now. It had harmonics that shouldn't exist, echoes of the Voidwalker entities that lived inside the ship's systems. The ships themselves had become hybrid creatures, Part human technology, part voidwalker biology, they could phase in and out of normal space, traveling through dimensions that other species couldn't even see. When they needed to, they could become invisible to any sensor in the galaxy. Nari had changed the most of anyone. She worked in laboratories that existed in folded space, bigger inside than outside. Her body looked mostly human, but she could survive in the vacuum of space without a suit. Her eyes could see across multiple dimensions at once. When she looked at a person, she saw not just their body, but their thoughts and feelings as well. The new generation is adapting faster, she told her brother. Around them, children born in the abyss played games that involved stepping through walls and floating in midair. To them, phasing between dimensions was as natural as walking. These children were still human in their hearts and minds. They laughed and cried and loved their families, but they could do things that would seem like magic to anyone from the galaxy. They were the future of humanity, and they were magnificent and terrifying. General Yuna commanded the Abyss Guard, the military force that had replaced the old human armies. Her soldiers no longer needed ships or weapons in the traditional sense. They had bonded with Voidwalker entities, becoming living weapons that could appear anywhere and strike from angles that three-dimensional beings couldn't understand. "Show me the new recruits," she told her aide. Captain Hayendot in the training areas, soldiers practiced combat techniques that looked like dancing with shadows. They learned to phase through solid matter, to exist in multiple locations at once, to manipulate dark energy with their bare hands. A single Abyss Guard could destroy an entire enemy ship just by touching it and willing it to stop existing. But they were still human soldiers, with human loyalty and human courage. They protected the fleet's civilians and followed orders from human commanders. The Voidwalker entities enhanced their abilities, but humans remained in control. The most changed of all was Seokjin. He had volunteered for the deepest level of bonding with the Abyss entities. Now he existed partially outside normal space and time. His body flickered between solid and transparent. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. "The Deep Ones are pleased with our progress," he told the fleet's leaders. The Deep Ones were the ancient Voidwalkers who lived at the very heart of the abyss. They were older than most stars and had power that could reshape reality itself. Through Seokjin, humanity learned the true history of the abyss. Long ago, other species had lived here. They had been physical beings like humans. But over millions of years, they had evolved beyond the need for solid bodies. They had become beings of pure energy and thought, able to exist in the spaces between dimensions. "They offer us the same evolution," Seokjin explained. "But they warn us that the path is difficult. Some will not survive the change. Others will go too far and lose their humanity completely." The fleet's leaders had to make hard choices. Not everyone could handle the transformation. Some humans chose to remain unchanged, living in special areas of the ships that were shielded from the abyss energy. They were still valued members of the community, but they could not go where the changed humans went. Others tried to change too quickly and lost themselves. They became something that was no longer human, no longer individual. The fleet learned to be careful, to change slowly and keep their human hearts even as their bodies and minds became something new. Admiral Sung-ho had died 5 years earlier, his body finally unable to handle the stress of the transformation. But his successor, Admiral Jinwoo, had adapted well. He could phase between dimensions and communicate directly with the ship's Voidwalker entities. Under his command, the human fleet had become something that no enemy could hope to defeat. The ships could appear anywhere without warning. The soldiers could walk through walls and strike from inside enemy vessels. The scientists could manipulate matter and energy in ways that seemed impossible. Humanity had become masters of the dark space between galaxies. Jiwon still lived, kept alive by the same forces that powered the ships. She was over 90 years old but looked 40. The abyss energy had stopped her aging and given her new abilities. She could sense the thoughts and emotions of everyone in the fleet. She had become not just their ambassador but their spiritual guide. "We are ready," she announced to the fleet's council. Around the table sat the leaders of humanity's transformation. Some looked mostly human. Others flickered between dimensions. All of them carried power that could challenge gods. "Ready for what?" asked Dr. Kang-ho. He had been the most cautious about the changes, but even he had accepted some modifications to survive in the abyss. "To return home," Jiwon said. "To show the galaxy what their exile has created." Minji, Jiwon's daughter, had grown up in the abyss. She was part of the first generation to be born between galaxies, and she had abilities that amazed even the Voidwalkers. She could exist in dozens of dimensions simultaneously and manipulate dark energy like it was clay in her hands. "The scouts report that the galaxy has grown fat and lazy," she said. "The council thinks they are safe because they drove us away. They have no idea what we have become." The decision was unanimous. After 30 years in exile, humanity would return to the galaxy. But they would not return as refugees begging for mercy. They would return as masters of powers that the council could not imagine. The Abyss fleet began to move toward the distant galaxy. Behind them, the Voidwalkers watched and approved. Humanity had passed their test. They had learned to master the darkness without losing their souls. Now it was time to use that mastery to bring justice to those who had wronged them. The council was about to learn that exile had not destroyed humanity. It had forged them into something far more dangerous than they had ever feared. The final battle came at Centrum Prime, the capital system of the Galactic Council. Every major fleet in the galaxy had gathered there for humanity's last stand, or so the aliens thought. Thousands of ships formed defensive lines around the system's 3 planets. Their weapons charged and ready, Admiral Velthar commanded the Nexari forces from his flagship Crystal's Edge. The great ship gleamed like a jewel among the stars, its crystalline hull reflecting the light of Centrum's sun. Around him, Vorthak dreadnoughts spread their tentacle-like sensor arrays, searching for any sign of human approach. "All stations report ready," announced Commander Zethrak from the communications center. "Our sensors show nothing approaching from any direction." But the sensors were useless against an enemy that could exist outside normal space. Admiral Minji's Abyss fleet moved through dimensions that the Council couldn't detect, traveling through the dark spaces between reality itself. "Phase into normal space on my mark," Minji commanded from the bridge of her flagship Void Sovereign. Around her, the ship's human crew worked alongside Voidwalker entities that flickered in and out of existence. The bridge itself existed in folded space, larger inside than the laws of physics should allow. "All ships report ready for dimensional transition," replied Captain Juhi from the tactical station. The young woman had been born in the abyss and could see across multiple dimensions simultaneously. To her, the Council fleet looked like sleeping children waiting to be awakened by nightmares. Execute. The human fleet materialized in the heart of the Council formation like shadows suddenly given form. Ships that had been invisible moments before now hung in space like dark angels, their hulls wreathed in energy that hurt to look at directly. The Council ships opened fire immediately, but their weapons passed harmlessly through targets that weren't entirely there. Laser beams and plasma bolts struck empty space as the human vessels phased in and out of reality. "How do we fight something we can't hit?" demanded Admiral Vorthak from his command ship. The Vorthak military leader's tentacles writhed with frustration as his most powerful weapons proved useless. The answer came swiftly and terribly. Captain Dongwu's ship Void's Edge appeared inside the Council flagship's hull, its crew already moving through the corridors like living shadows. Abyss Guard soldiers materialized in the ship's control rooms, their forms flickering between human and something far more dangerous. Major Hiram led the assault on the bridge. She walked through the sealed blast doors as if they were made of air, her body existing in multiple dimensions at once. The Vorthak crew fired their personal weapons at her, but the energy bolts passed through her harmlessly. "Surrender," she said in a voice that echoed with harmonics from beyond normal space. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot stop us. This battle is already over." But Admiral Vorthak was too proud to surrender. He activated his ship's self-destruct sequence, hoping to take the human soldiers with him. The explosion tore through the flagship's hull, but when the fire and debris cleared, the humans were still there, untouched by the blast that should have killed them. Across the battle zone, the same scene played out again and again. Human forces appeared inside enemy ships, disabled their weapons and engines, and captured their crews without killing them. It wasn't mercy. It was a demonstration of complete superiority. The true masterstroke came when the enslaved species began to rebel. For 30 years, the Corvani had worked in the Council's mines, waiting for a chance at freedom. The Pralani survivors had hidden on distant worlds, dreaming of revenge. Dozens of other oppressed species had suffered under Council rule. Now Nari, leading humanity's diplomatic corps, offered them what they had always wanted: freedom and protection. Using communication channels that bypassed all council security, she spoke directly to the slaves and outcasts. "We have returned to bring justice," her message said. "Those who stand with us will be free. Those who continue to support the council will share their fate." The rebellion spread like wildfire across the galaxy. On mining worlds, Corvani workers rose up against their guards. On industrial planets, enslaved species seized control of factories and shipyards. The council's own oppressed populations turned against their masters. The psychological effect was devastating. Council forces found themselves fighting not just an impossible enemy from outside, but rebellions within their own territories. Ships mutinied when their enslaved crews learned that liberation had come. Entire star systems declared independence and requested human protection. In the end, the military defeat was almost an afterthought. The Council's fleet had been neutralized without being destroyed. Their crews were captured without being killed. Their government had collapsed as their own subjects turned against them. The final confrontation took place in the Council's ultimate stronghold, a bunker deep beneath Centrum Prime's surface, protected by shields that could supposedly stop any attack. The surviving Council leaders huddled there, believing they were safe from the humans above. Seokjin proved them wrong. The former human had evolved so far beyond normal existence that matter and energy bent around his will. He simply appeared in the center of their sealed chamber, his form shifting between human and something vast and terrible. "You judged us unworthy to exist among you," he said in a voice that came from everywhere at once. "Now we judge you." High Crystal Zetharan, the Nexari leader, sparked with terror as she faced this being that had once been human. What have you become?" "What you forced us to become," Seokjin replied. "You drove us into the abyss where we learned to master powers you cannot comprehend. You thought exile would destroy us. Instead, it forged us into your superiors." The judgment was swift. The council leaders were given the same choice they had once offered humanity: exile or transformation. Most chose exile, accepting banishment to the galactic rim rather than face the unknown changes that had made humans into gods. Some species, recognizing their errors, requested to join humanity's new order. The Corvani were freed from slavery and given worlds of their own. The surviving Prelani were offered new homes and protection. Dozens of other species found themselves liberated from council oppression. But the real change was deeper than politics or military conquest. Humanity had transcended the normal limits of existence. They had become masters not just of the galaxy, but of the dark spaces between realities. They wielded powers that could reshape matter and energy with a thought. Yet they had not forgotten what it meant to be human. Justice, compassion, protection of the innocent, these values had not been lost in their transformation. If anything, their new abilities made them more committed to these ideals. Jiwon, now sustained by Abyss technology but still recognizably the ambassador who had faced the Council's judgment long ago, addressed the liberated galaxy from her new capital ship. Behind her, the great vessels of the Abyss fleet hung in space like dark angels watching over their new domain. 30 years ago, you exiled us for what you feared we might become, she said. You were right to fear us, but wrong about why. We have indeed become masters of powers beyond your imagination. But we use these powers not for conquest, but for justice. The galaxy now belonged to humanity and their allies. The age of the Council's false peace was over. In its place came a new order, guided by beings who had learned to master the darkness itself but had never forgotten the light of their humanity. Tae-hyun, now ancient but kept vital by his symbiosis with Voidwalker entities, stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, built in orbit around the former Council capital. Below, the species that had once ruled the galaxy now worked alongside transformed humans to build something better. The exile was over. Humanity had returned not as refugees, but as the galaxy's new guardians. The Council had sought to eliminate a threat, but instead had forged the greatest protectors the galaxy had ever known. In the end, their greatest fear had come true. Humanity had indeed become masters of the galaxy. But they had also become something the Council never expected: just and merciful rulers who used their terrible power to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. The age of darkness was over. The age of dark mastery had begun.